Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Tzy Horng. I'm the founder of the Best of You movement and your host for today's event. Today's event is called Conversations Reimagined. Conversations Reimagined is a space where we talk about ideas about reimagining and building a better future. Conversations Reimagined is also brought to you by the Best of You movement. The Best of You, as some of you may know, is a movement about appreciative storytelling, and we anchor on appreciative storytelling to build stronger communities. Through storytelling, the Best of You hopes that we can be more aware of collective challenges we face as a community. Each conversation, I believe, is a precious opportunity to touch on topics that are difficult to address, yet often most pressing in communities. In today's series of Conversations Reimagined, we will be talking about equality and urban poverty. This series of Conversations Reimagined also serves as a launch event for an interactive storybook that we've developed, and it's called The Impossible Timetable of Ron. The Impossible Timetable of Ron is a story of an 11-year-old boy who comes from a low-income family. The story gives us a look into his daily life, where he navigates an almost impossible schedule, juggling multiple responsibilities, including taking care of his sister, preparing for school, cooking meals for his family, house chores, his homework, at the same time trying to pursue his dreams. While the story is a work of fiction, it is based on research on children in adverse living conditions, and it aims to highlight the many constraints that urban poverty exerts on young children. It ends on an optimistic note because research on resilient children like Ron also shows that many of them living in such conditions learn to pick up skills at a very, very young age. As users walk through Ron's day, they will be asked to help Ron make various difficult decisions. At the end of Ron's story, readers will be led to a community resource hub where they can find ways to contribute to the cause, join the conversation, learn more about community resources on supporting the poor, and access reading materials on the topic itself. We designed the story because we want to instill a stronger sense of empathy in everyone in our community today. There are poor families in our midst, and they may face many struggles. They are not the exception in our community, right? It's not okay that we tolerate them as an exception. They are very much a part of our community, and we need to play a stronger role in making their lives better. Today, we look forward to make your afternoon a meaningful one with our special guest, Mr. Yong Teck Meng, and we welcome any questions you may have nearing the end of the program. So feel free to send in your questions to our Facebook page or YouTube channel under comments. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Mr. Yong Teck Meng on our program today. Teck Meng is the National Director for Habitat for Humanity Singapore. He founded Habitat Singapore with a team of volunteers in 2004. And through the years, he has led his team to raise more than $32 million for its work in Singapore and in the region. This is just one of many hats that he wears. He also pastors at the Reformed Evangelical Church, Singapore, and it's the chaplain for Far East Organization, Singapore's largest real estate developer. Prior to his engagement in both organizations, Teck Meng spent 10 years as an engineer and another 12 years as an entrepreneur, involved in a variety of businesses in the education sector. In our first installation of this series, he will speak to us about homelessness in Singapore and abroad. He will share his views about urban poverty, the importance of youth volunteerism and community building, and his rich experience in community service. But let's not make this too formal a conversation. It's supposed to be a little bit more casual. So we want this to be meaningful and akin to a friendly talk between like-minded people. So without any further ado, welcome to the program, Teck Meng. I'm
Thank you.
so happy that you are able to join us today.
Thank you.
We're honored to have you as a guest. I mean, you've done so much amazing work, and it's been truly humbling and inspiring. So why don't you tell me more about yourself? Yeah.
Well, thank you for the very warm introduction. And as you have said, I do get involved in, my wife said far too many things in my life. But I think relevant to the topic today, I have been involved in charitable work since I was very young. More seriously, from the teenage years, I kept getting myself involved in different kind of charitable work, and then all the way to adulthood. I went to the United States to do my engineering degree, and even when I was there too, I got involved in doing work among the community there. Once I came back to Singapore, the first thing I did was to quickly look for opportunity to volunteer. Yeah, so I guess that's what I've been doing all my life long.
Okay. And so with Habitat, right? Habitat has been established for coming 18 years, right?
In Singapore, yes.
Sorry, Habitat Singapore, I keep messing that up. Could you tell us more about how you founded Habitat Singapore?
Well, when I came back from my studies, what happened was that I started working for a electronic company, a pretty big one actually. They had a factory in Ang Mo Kio. And the National Council of Social Service had this new program called the SHARE program. What they wanted to do was to invite corporations to share their executives for about a month or so. So in other words, you're supposed to loan out your executives to work for the National Council of Social Service that started the Community Chest program. So our job was to go ask people to donate money every month, maybe $1. Back then, $1 was very big. I'm quite old, so it's a long time ago. So I quickly volunteered to be in that program. So the company allowed me to do that. So from there, you forge a lot of friendships with people. And through the years, I continued to support the work of Community Chest and the SHARE program. So one of the executives or the person I knew left NCSS and went to work for Habitat International. And one fine day she called me out and said that, hey, Habitat for Humanity International wanted to start a Singapore branch. Would you want to help us do this? And so I asked her, what does that mean? What does it mean to do something? She said, you must make it happen. And that's it, So I said, okay, that's what I wanted to hear. So then she passed me some literature about what Habitat is all about. I read them and I was pretty convinced that this is a very interesting thing to do. And so that's how it started.
Okay. But I think Habitat International has a longer history, right? So.
Oh yeah, it started in the 1970s in a place called Americas in Georgia, the state of Georgia, by a person by the name of Millard Fuller. Millard Fuller has passed on, and I'm very proud to say that I can call him my friend. We have met face to face. He came to open the Singapore office. Yeah, so his story was quite fascinating. He was a young person who was very eager to make a lot of money. So he wanted to be a millionaire by the time he was 30, and he did that. He was actually a lawyer, but very entrepreneurial. So he kept thinking about new ways to make money, and there was so many fascinating stories about how he made money. One of them was like he went back to his old university, and then he asked the mothers of the students to contribute their best recipe. Yeah, the family's best recipe. And he did, no, first he went to ask the parents whether they want to celebrate the birthdays of their kids who are in school.
Okay.
And for a small fee, he will do everything,
Oh, okay.
And so he got a lot of business that way. And then he went to ask the mother, can you also give me the best recipe of your family?
Okay.
And so with that, he collected a lot of best recipe. And he made a recipe book, and which sold for the millions, because it's just a collection of very old traditional recipes. So this very entrepreneur kind of thinking. And so he made a lot of money, and what happened was that then he neglected his wife, and the wife ran away. It's very Korean drama, So he gave chase and found her in New York and asked her, what is it that you want? And the wife said, we have money, but we have no love. And so together, the Fullers decided that they will sell everything they have and devote themselves to humanitarian work. They started being missionaries, But because Miller Fuller was such an entrepreneurial person, he kept thinking about the issue of poverty. And he himself admitted that he deliberately focused on building houses because nobody else was really doing that. And he also understood that a person needs a proper house and a proper place to live in and have dignity before he can get his act together. So having a proper place to live in is a fundamental human right, and also it will break the poverty cycle.
Yes.
The children will grow up healthy and strong and get a proper place to study, and they will be, in some countries, it is also a place where women are kept safe.
Yeah.
If you have a proper house, a proper door, then it cannot be broken in easily. So he started Habitat for Humanity with the idea that is quite innovative and easy to understand. So it's like you walk into a room full of people, you ask the people, you tell the people that, you know, there's some guy out there who need a house. Would you come and help? Share in the cost of the housing and building the house, and come alongside and build together. And anybody who raise the hand, it doesn't matter what's your background, your religion, whether you are good looking, ugly, whatever it is, we don't care. The commonality is that we want to help. And so we all go there together, we build a house. And the fascinating thing is that the house partner, the person who will receive the house, also has to contribute back in building the house. And in some countries, depending on the situation, pay back either the cost of the entire house or a portion of it. And so that's how the whole movement started.
I see. So that's the actual functioning model of it.
Yes, it's an actual functioning model. Habitat for Humanity has presence in about 70 countries around the world. And Singapore is one of the few countries where there is no build whatsoever. There's nothing
which
to build
brings me to my next question, because Singapore is also excellent in building houses and whatnot, right? But at the same time, everyone here, as we all know, most if not everybody here has a roof over its head.
Yeah.
So then how did Habitat Singapore function? What did it do?
When I was asked to start Habitat for Humanity Singapore, the idea was to raise money for other habitat locations like Habitat Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia. There's so many different habitat places. If you go to places like Habitat for Humanity, India, for example, well, they have their work cut out for us because poverty is in such a serious problem there, and they need like a few millions of houses, you know, for the poor. So the idea is that Singaporeans are so well-to-do and so happy with everything, they should have enough cash, spare cash to give away. By the way, if you're listening to a program and you have the $100 CDC voucher, we are ready to take it from you if you don't need it. So the idea is the excesses, you know, you give it away. But after that, I quickly realized that the experience of Habitat in the build is actually very important. It attracted me too. I wanted to participate in the actual house build. So what I did was that I got Habitat for Humanity Indonesia to agree to have us run Batam, the closest island to us, so that we can go to Batam and build houses, actual houses for the poor there, as if it is just our backyard. And it's only an hour away by ferry. So many people have gone to join that program. On Saturday morning, they can go, leave Singapore, and by evening, they're back in Singapore. I mean, you won't build a whole house, but at least you can build a wall or a door or something along that line. Some people will stay there for like 2-3 days, and then you can build a lot better. So that was the main thing that happened. And then later, we discovered that although there are very good public housing in Singapore, and in fact, it's not just very good, it's the best in the world. We have public housing that are really world-class that other countries are learning from. However, behind every closed door is a private family. And so we found out that there were many elderly people especially, and also families that are disadvantaged, living in a condition that is, we believe is not acceptable. So for example, some elderly folks are mentally not too functioning, and so they become hoarding people, or they live in an environment full of cockroaches, bed bugs, whole place is just filthy, or sometimes they are just weak, and even if they wanted to, they don't have the ability to clean up the place well. So then we discovered that, hey, that's also part of what it means to live with dignity. And so we started a project called Project Homework, where we gather volunteers to go in and clean up the houses for the elderly.
I mean, okay, so then how was that taken by the volunteers? The cleaning up, the work of cleaning up, it doesn't sound like a very fancy or some may say very interesting kind of volunteer work. How is that taken up? Yeah.
Well, the best habitat experience must be the house built. That's for certain, because you are building an actual house, and it is a very wonderful experience. And the houses are designed to be, I used to use the word idiot-proof, but it's not very nice. User-friendly. So
easy to assemble, right?
Anybody can build kind of thing. Okay. So it's deliberately designed to be simple and easy. So we use the word simple and affordable kind of housing. And the key advantage of Habitat's work is always the before and after. When you build a house, when you build a house in a place like Batam, for example, sometimes you can see where this guy lived. Or certainly in Cambodia, they may be in a slum somewhere and all that, and then the new house is like maybe a stone's throw away. The volunteers can actually go and see the really horrible state of the original house. Sometimes it's not even a house, it's a tent or something like that. Yeah. And then all the while you are building a house. And so when you get to complete the house, it's just a very rewarding experience. Even for me, after so many years, every time I get to participate in something like that, it's really very satisfying and very cool experience. Now the cleaning of the house is less dramatic, but still there's a before and after. So you go into one of these houses and it really looks horrible, and you think to yourself, how can this elderly person live in a condition like this? Yeah. And then together with your volunteers, you roll up your sleeve, you go in, you clean up the whole place, and then the place becomes livable and clean. And of course the beneficiaries are all very appreciative. And it's very funny sometimes. There was this, one time I brought this family to clean a house, and this family happened to be very high net worth group, and the kids had never lifted a finger in their entire life, right? But the dad thought that it's good for them to go and clean a house. So I brought them personally. I brought them to a house where this elderly lady who was weak and was not able to keep the house clean, and the house was quite dirty. Elderly lady happened to be Hainanese, and I'm Hainanese. So throughout the whole cleaning process, right, this guy who is very rich and his wife and the kids, they were cleaning all over the place. The guy was cleaning the toilet. This elderly lady went around literally cursing at them in Hainanese, saying to them that you guys are so lazy, you didn't clean it well, there's this spot here missing and this and that, all in Hainanese. But this family cannot speak Hainanese, so they have no idea what she was talking about, right? So the guy kept asking me, what is she saying, what's she saying? And I said, she's saying, you're doing a good job, very good, great, everything is wonderful. And the thing that was quite interesting was at the end of the cleaning session, the elderly woman go to every one of them and give them $2 each, $2 tip for you. I mean, the thing about it is that it's just a lifelong habit, right? The way she reacted to them. But of course, she was very appreciative, and that's why she thought that she would give them $2 each. So the kind of experiences help the volunteers really understand that their work has very immediate impact, immediate reward. Other than house cleaning, we also do things like garbage picking. We have a program called the Little Red Dot, and also block walk. Block walk is where you clean right where your block is. When you do things like that, you immediately realize how filthy the place is. All the cigarette butts and all these funny things hiding in funny corner. And those are very real stuff that volunteers immediately will feel impacted. So in a sense, that's a kind of advantage of the way we work. So people really understand that this is very real and very pragmatic work. And those who like that will always go and talk about it, promote it where they are. And so for us, it is a happy situation that we are in.
Yeah, I think, getting involved in such situations must open up the eyes of, open up the world for many of them, because they haven't probably not stepped into that side of the world, or they open up to bigger corners of the society as well. And I mean, talking about being clean, Singapore has the reputation of being one of the cleanest developed nation in the world.
Right.
It is also one of the most wealthy nations in the world as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we frequently hear reports that inequality is also rising in Singapore. Right? There's the divide between the rich and the poor is always getting bigger and bigger. And in your perspective, where in your experience in community service, right? Why do you think this inequality still persists in Singapore?
Oh, that's a very big question, right? Because it has to do with a lot of things coming together. I will come right out and say that of all the places that we have operated in, and because of the nature of Habitat for Humanity Singapore, we really do support other regions apart from doing whatever we do in Singapore. We support Indonesia, especially Cambodia. We have a big program in Cambodia, India, Thailand. We send volunteers all over. In fact, you'll be surprised. The furthest Singaporean volunteers have gone to would be Romania and Mongolia. That's like very far away places. Romania is especially fascinating because you go there, you build for the Romas, who are gypsy people. So the pictures are all very strange. You see all these Asian people helping Caucasian build houses. It's a cultural thing that's very, very, very odd in that way. Yeah. So every country has its own problem, and I'll come right out and say that it is in Singapore we have solved many of the problems already. For example, when you turn on your tap, you can drink the water.
Yes.
Now that alone is a very big achievement because even in this region, you cannot quite say that about many places. And I have two daughters. My daughters, when they come home late, I'm not panicking. It's safe, You really cannot say that about many other places.
Correct. Yeah.
So sometimes when my daughters say that they want to go overseas and backpack or hitchhike and all that, I always panic. I want to tell them that please remember that this is not, wherever you're going is not Singapore, including the United States.
Correct.
So a lot of the issues are already quite solved. But however, no matter which society you go to, there will be people who will fall into the cracks. And in Singapore too, there are people who no matter what you say, sometimes there's dysfunctionality in the family, sometimes it's just whatever tragedies the person has gone through, and there are plenty of stories about unfortunate things that will happen to people. So it's a big question to ask. So despite the fact that we have a government that really would do many things that other countries cannot. For example, I mentioned the $100 CDC voucher thing. Very few countries can do that, give money away. Even when that is happening, there will still be a structural gap. And especially now with the way the world is changing, the gap between the have and the have-nots will continue to grow. And then many divides, right? You have the digital divide, you have your educational divide, So people are even trying to review things like meritocracy. Does it make sense? Because if you say that everybody is hired by their examination scores, if you are well-to-do, you don't have to go and help your father in a hawker store, then surely you will score better than me. So how do you try to solve all these balance? So it is a very complex question.
Definitely not one that we can solve very quickly also.
It is not something that we can solve very quickly. And sometimes people may get the illusion that if the problem is so big, so I better don't do anything. I can't do anything anyway. Our understanding is that we do what we can where we can with what we have. One of the illustration people always give is that, we have to be light of the world. And so if God gives you a light that's as big as a stadium, then you go and shine the stadium. But if you have a matchstick light, then you shine that matchstick light to wherever you are. Whatever the case is, we are convinced that people can do good wherever they are. And don't keep saying things like, this is a drop in the ocean or whatever it is, doesn't help anyone. You should do whatever you can where you are, because that's the right thing to do.
All right, I will circle back to that point later again, because I think it's a very important takeaway. I think one of the things that over the years, the best of you have encountered with many community organizations in Singapore and outside Singapore is that many of them are influenced by their faith. It could be whatever faith, it could be Christianity, it could be Buddhism as well. And I think faith plays quite an important role in driving some of the causes as well.
Right.
And Habitat, I believe, is also faith-based.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Habitat for Humanity is a Christian charity. We do not do any proselytizing, and we do not attach condition to the work we do. We do what we do because we believe that this is what the Bible instructs Christians to do. So earlier I gave the illustration that, you know, you walk into a room full of people, you ask them who wants to do something to help someone outside. Anybody who raised a hand, whether you're Christian, Muslim, you're Hindu, Buddhist, gay, lesbian, whatever, it doesn't matter. So long as you say you want to do something, we celebrate the commonality, and we then go out there and we go help the poor. Now, if you were to ask, why did I walk into the room in the first place? The answer is because I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. So that's where the Christian linkage is seen.
Okay. So I guess this is quite the similar question, but maybe you can go into more detail. Did your faith come to influence your involvement in the community and your work for the community?
Well, the answer definitely would be yes. I would say that there are a couple of things. Number one, I'm primarily driven by faith, to know that it is my role to live a life where I am to live for a cause bigger than the self. And leave the world better than when I found it. So that's a very faith-based kind of
that's wonderful.
Idea. At the same time, I must also say that there are also pragmatic reasons, in that I have found that it is surprisingly easy to impact the lives of other people, or that it's not rocket science, that with the little that I do, and I mean, just now you gave me all this glowing description, which is great. After all, maybe you're the host, you need to do that, right? But honestly, when I'm listening to you, I say, it's not that great, right? It's like, okay, you know. I find that it's actually not that difficult. For example, if you think about our work in cleaning the houses, all that, is it rocket science? It's not, right? You just gather a group of people and you say, hey, let's go. Okay, cameraman, let's go. It's very simple, you know. So it doesn't take a lot, I feel.
Yeah.
And so that attracted me to this kind of work, because I feel that it's not so difficult as people think it is. And the rewards are great too, because you really feel that this is very real. So earlier you said, for example, I was an entrepreneur for like 12 years, right? Now in business, which you are into, you always have to ask yourself, will people buy this product? Where is the demand?
Yes.
Am I making the right choice? Is this,
absolutely,
you know, that kind of thing? But, you know, charity is a business with no lack of demand. There's no end to it, okay? It's just a bottomless pit kind of thing. So no matter what you do, it's always going to be important, it's always going to be appreciated, it's always going to be useful.
Yeah.
So I find that to appeal to the engineering side of what I do. So Habitat combines the two together, right? Because it basically is a pretty hard, wired engineering, architectural, construction kind of thing, a very pragmatic kind of work. And I like that very much. Because when you say, for example, that you're going to build 100 houses for this region, that's your promise. You go move heaven and earth to build that 100 houses, and you can count them. Yeah. And that appeals to me. There are many charities out there, many good causes out there. Some are pretty abstract, for example. And when it's a bit more abstract, then it's harder to pinpoint the impact. So Habitat in that sense is wonderful for me that way. I can count exactly, and I can go visit them again, you know, and remember that, you know, this crooked door was made by me. so that part is cool. Yeah.
Wow, okay, wow, excellent. I mean, I actually have another question, because you said that it's, you know, you need to have a cause greater than yourself, right? And that was very much ingrained in you through your faith as well. Can you imagine your life right now without a cause greater than yourself?
You know, there are a couple of things through the years that is that influence the way I think, right? For example, Socrates says that unexamined life is not worth living. So what he meant is that if your life is smooth as silk, it's actually not worth living. So you sort of need challenges and all that. Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat for Humanity, talk about how your life should not be a life where you just endured, a life endured. That means, it's so boring that you just endure it through your days, you know. So if you live without a cause greater than the self, and you're only living for yourself, you really are living a life that is endured. You are not making any change, you're not making anything better. And of course, when you talk about faith, right, one of the commandments in the Bible that is most ignored is it is more blessed to give than to receive. And that's said by Jesus Christ in the book of Acts. Most people ignore it because you know that for sure, because everybody wants blessing, right? And here you have a direct instruction that telling you that you are more blessed if you give than you receive. But most people don't want to give, which means that they don't believe that that's the case. Okay. But of course, for me, it is absolutely so. So while we run Habitat for Humanity, and in our organization, we have different people doing different things. Some people do fundraising, some people finance, some people do the communication, and they are ops people. So the operation people are really on the ground. We make sure that every single year we all will be on the ground. Before the COVID, every year, whole gang of us will go build a house in the region, whether it's in Batam or Krabi, Thailand, or together with our people, so that you can really see for yourself the work, the impact of the work you do, because we believe that the build itself will remind us of why we do what we do. And so the fact is that if you don't have a cause greater than yourself, the reality is that actually your life is a very poor life, you know. One of the books that Taiwanese ex-president Chen Shui-bian, he got arrested and put in jail, right? And then his son went to visit him, and the son gave him a book written by a pastor. The book's title is 穷到只剩下钱. That means you are so poor that all you have is money.
Yeah.
So it's the same concept, you know, that if you don't live for a cause greater than self, you can be very rich, but actually the reality is that you are a very poor person because all you have is money.
Thank you. That was very profound, and thank you for your sharing. I guess at this juncture, I want to turn another question on its head again. So the community work that you are doing and that you've done over the so many years, has that in turn come to influence your faith and how you come to see humanity and the community?
Okay, good question. I think the thing that really helped me to be, when I'm in the community, is to continue to learn about the reality of the life that people have and the reality of the faith when you apply it to life. Because for many people, faith is very personal, and then you go to a church, you go to a temple, you pray, you meditate, or you chant, or whatever it is, and it's all about yourself. The Christian faith actually is more than that. You are supposed to go out there and go and impact the world. So you are supposed to love God, and you're supposed to love people as yourself. But most people just stop at the first one, which you love God, you know, so that you can be, I mean, if you even go to church, so you're very faithful to it. But then they can be very mean-spirited people, and they don't feel that there's a need to love others. Maybe you love your own kind, you know. But it's very clear in the Bible that if you do that, you're no better than a non-believer, right? But these are things that people do quite ignore. And also, unhappily, in faith, there are always quite a lot of biases and judgmental attitude towards people of different orientation. Maybe the sexual orientation is different from you. Maybe their lifestyle is different, all that. And yeah, I think faith has the problem of making people feel holier than other people, so it becomes very judgmental and unkind. From the time of Jesus Christ to today, it's still exactly the same, right? So when you are on the ground and you really want to help someone, you have to learn to think on that guy's shoe and have empathy towards him. If not, it won't last, right? Because after a while you say, what am I going to do with this fellow? It's so horrible and so disgusting, or whatever it is. Why should I help him or her? So I think that the work that we do actually turn around and shape my understanding of my faith even better, in a more deeper and more real manner, instead of just being very theological, writing paper, or you preach and you talk non-stop. This is very, very hands-on. So for example, we had a case where there was this mother or a woman who was living in Holland Village, and a lot of people don't know, but opposite the place where you see a lot of Caucasians and foreigners drinking coffee. There's this block of flat in Holland Village. There's just for a one-room flat. And there was this lady who was living inside there, and she's mentally not sound. So that was like the worst case I've ever seen in all my years. So she literally went around the house doing her business, you know, and there was a lot of brown stuff everywhere. It was very scary.
Oh dear.
And so when you open the door and you go in the house, it's like, wow, you know, how could anybody live like that?
Yeah.
So what happened was that there were volunteers with us, and the volunteers found out that this lady had children. She had 4, if I'm not mistaken, you know. And so they started cursing and swearing, right, because they feel that this is so horrible. The kids, how can they allow their mother to live like that? And then they started cursing and asking lightning to strike whoever, you know, that kind of thing. And I look at the volunteers and I told them, I said, look here, you are all assuming that she was a great mother. And then all of a sudden they all keep quiet, you know, it's like, oh, because it could very well be that she was a horrible mother, that maybe she abused the children or whatever, and they don't have anything to do with her, right, in her life. As far as Habitat for Humanity is concerned, she's a human being. So it doesn't matter what she had done in the past, we cannot allow her to live like an animal. And so we will move in and help her. And that's very enlightening to me, because if you go through the normal process of faith-based thinking or that, a lot of people will, you know, assume that she was a horrible person and so she deserved it or something like that. So there are many things that I feel Habitat has taught me and continue to teach me till today. Yeah, every time I hit the ground, every time I visit some of these folks and also get involved in the work, you are reminded again that you don't just talk about theories in life. You really, really need to think through some of the real issues and have empathy and understand that sometimes things are a lot more complicated than you think it is. It's not such a simple, you don't wave a magic wand and be judgmental and solve the problem. Yeah.
I mean, this is all very sobering to hear. I mean, it's also a very huge relief for me to hear as well. In terms of what I hear from your recounting of the volunteers' experience, because I feel that a lot of times we don't see these things, and then when we don't see them, we don't do anything about them, and then we don't think about them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in our previous conversations, I believe that you talked to me about student volunteers. There are student volunteers. Sometimes they come for ECA points or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but at some point you also talked about some of the more positive ones, like they come back and they find it meaningful. Why do you think it's very important for our young people to actually see these parts of Singapore, especially in a very clean city like Singapore? Homelessness or poverty is actually very hard to see. Why do you think it's important for young people to see it?
Well, in Habitat for Humanity's understanding, the young people are most important. In fact, in other countries, in the United States, for example, they have a lot of campus chapters. So that means that at the university, they have a chapter, Habitat for Humanity chapter there. And these kids will then run their own Habitat program. And when we do our own research, we find that one of the key factors of success for Habitat for Humanity is because we make a conscious decision very early to have campus chapters. And then these kids will grow up, they will understand the Habitat's philosophy better, then they will become CEOs, and then they will channel their resources and their company to help Habitat. And so in the United States of America especially, Habitat for Humanity is a very strong and popular charity because they have so-called invested in the young in the earliest days. And so all over the world, in the Asia-Pacific region, for example, we have a lot of emphasis on youth group, youth leader. In fact, I'm going to have a board meeting next Tuesday in which we will talk about setting up a youth board. That means we have a kind of parallel board made up of all the young people and see what they have to think about things. Of course, it's very important to engage the young because we always say that the future sort of belongs to the young, right?
Yes.
I mean, since we were young, when I was young, I keep thinking about it. Now I'm not very happy to think about it because I'm no longer young. So at every stage of life, you should do something. However, quite clearly, if you do not develop empathy when you are young, the probability of you developing it when you're old is not very high.
Oh, that is gold.
Yeah,
Yes,
because you are involved in so many things, right? Like you get married, you have children, you got a career, you got to think about a lot of things. So if you did not start young, I think it's really, really hard to persuade people when they are old with so many decades of very self-centered thinking to start thinking about other people. So some people, that's why this CIP pointing is something that I really don't appreciate, because you do it for some points. It's a bit like some people do charity work because it's a corporate social responsibility, so we want to tell the world we are doing this, but actually we don't care. That, of course, better than nothing, but the right thing to do really is to help everyone, especially the young, to understand that you don't live in an island. This is our community. Yes, the elderly fellow is very cranky and dirty and smelly or whatever, but guess what? He or she is part of the community.
Correct.
And part of who we are.
Correct.
And so we do need to have empathy and to accept them and to help them along the way. And some of them, the help could be very long-term, because, for example, a hoarder whose house you just clean this month, next month, like half the garbage will come back, because the fellow mentally not too sound. What does that mean? That means you have to keep helping.
Coming back to help.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you said is absolutely true. It cannot be extrinsically motivated, right. There's a reward at the end of all the help that you do, right? It has to come from a genuine care. And these things, you're absolutely right. If you don't start them young, right, it's harder to get them when you're much later in your life. Yes.
It is. There was this friend of mine who I've known for many years. He suddenly called me out for lunch, and that was many years ago. And he's very successful, live in a big house, have kids and what have you. And so I was quite surprised why he wanted to have lunch with me. And he sat across me, and then he said, "I need to find myself." So I said, "What does that mean?" So it's a midlife crisis kind of thing, right? So I said, "What do you mean by need to find yourself?" He said, "I discovered that my children are very selfish."
Okay.
And his kids by then was like late teens and all that. He said, "I found that I brought up my children, and they all only care for themselves. They don't care for anyone else, So that sort of prompted him to rethink about what's the value of life and why are we doing all these things, what's the meaning of this. And of course also midlife crisis, that's the other thing. So actually I brought him to then build a house in Thailand, and then he became a good volunteer for other charity, which is great as well, So, but it took a very drastic thing for him to start thinking along that line, and like from the fact that his kids are all like brought up to be only thinking about themselves, so all of a sudden he realized that this is not right. Something is wrong with the picture. He's not even religious, in that sense. So that's why it's really important to teach the kids to have empathy, because if not, our society will become a really cold one. And when I'm old, I'm going to live in a terrible place. So.
I guess, leading from that, I think after all that you have accomplished, after all that you've worked on in Habitat and beyond as well, what is the most important thing that you would like to see changed? So that, we would have probably a more equal footing in society, or more equality in society, and children who are not so self-centered. What would you like to see changed? Yeah.
The question sounds like a Miss Universe pageant question.
Yeah, a little bit.
The standard answer is world peace. No, if you focus on Singapore alone, right? Of course, you ask me, I would say world peace, definitely. But if you think about Singapore alone, I would like to see Singapore to be a place where all the work that we do are more spontaneous.
Yep.
Meaning people really genuinely would volunteer. As opposed to because there's a campaign going on, there's minister coming or some town council thing organized, whatever, or like you said, score points and what have you. Yep. I get very disturbed when I find out that some of these young people wanted to volunteer with us so that their CV will look good for the President's Scholarship or something like that. It does happen, and
what do you say to them?
Well, it's a bit disheartening because to some extent you can't go and be judgmental about all these things, right? So if you want to volunteer, you volunteer. And for us, like I said, you need so much help that we don't quite care. If you volunteer, so it's better than no volunteering, right? But of course, you really hope that young people will volunteer because they understand what this is all about and they will want to. So if you remove the reward point, would they volunteer? If the answer is they will still volunteer, then I say, great, that we have achieved a lot. So I think that for Singapore as a society, I'm looking forward to the day where we are truly a caring society, not because some campaign tell us to, but because we are so. And this is one of the reasons why we go and pick up garbage, right? Because you said that Singapore is a clean city. It's a clean city because it's a clean, the ED city. It has a whole army of foreigners cleaning all over the place.
Absolutely.
For many years, we have championed the government to, the town councils, to suspend the cleaners for one day, just one day. And then you'll see how horribly dirty Singaporeans actually are, because your entire flat will be swung with all kind of garbage. Then the town council will not do it because they say, hey, then they go and complain to the MP that we never do our job. But I heard recently that finally there is going to be something like this. The whole of Singapore, they're going to stop cleaning one day just to make a point. So I'm happy that we have some progress that way. You want Singaporeans to be, using that as an example, you want Singaporeans to be clean because that's who they are. It's like if you go to Tokyo, right, you will not see a garbage bin on the street. No? It's incredible. You have to hold the garbage yourself all the way when you go back to a hotel, because they are naturally people who keep the place clean. So I hope we can achieve that, so that people understand that it should be a very natural part of life for me to not just care about my own family, but also take care of those who are disadvantaged.
And this comes back to your point just now, a bigger cause than yourself.
Correct.
I guess we are approaching the end, and I want to come back to the story of Ron as well, because a lot of what you've discussed is actually what we want to do in the Best of You as well. One of the things that we annually do, every year we do, is we go to schools and we talk about topics that are frequently not talked about in schools, such as the plight of foreign migrant workers, individuals with disabilities, urban poverty. So we developed this story about Ron, and when we developed it, I remember we had a conversation about this, and we agreed it ended somewhat optimistically. And sometimes that seems a little bit far away from reality. But there is importance in optimism as well, importance in hope as well. And I think one of the things you really left an impression with me is you said that we can all take very small actions, right? Could you? It's not much work to actually take a small step that would actually make the lives of someone better.
Right.
Maybe could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course I've seen the Ron Impossible timetable work, and his animation-wise and the approach is just great, right? Because I used to run a creative company and all that, so I really do appreciate it. It's just great. I think the good thing about that program is that it will allow the young people to at least understand that there are classmates of mine who may be in this kind of positioning. And I think that alone is something that is a great achievement, because we have come across people who are so sheltered that when they come to do house cleaning in a one-room flat, some of these young kids, they are surprised. They have never seen anything like this before. And to them, it's like, wow, how can anybody live in
the space of a one-room flat, is it?
That's nothing. I've heard one kid ask, how can anybody live in a place without a hall and without a full-length bathtub? It's sometimes you feel like slapping them. But so you can tell that some kids are so sheltered that they are so far away. And we talk about the gap between the rich and the poor and the have-nots, right? Let me throw in one more for you. For example, if you live in Sentosa Cove,
yes.
and you never leave the island, wonderful island of Sentosa, no way you will understand any of these things.
Correct.
Because you're just too far away, right?
Correct.
So I think that little program actually help and bring to the forefront this idea that there can be classmates who never had breakfast because daddy, mommy is so busy, they just, or don't have time to do things and all that. I think that's the thing that, to me, that data program really would be most beneficial, highlighting the fact that among the classmates there may be people like that. Or even, maybe it's not in your school, but outside of your school there will be other kids who are like that.
Correct.
So I think that while you are right that for me, because you have to understand that I deal with the reality all the time, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
So I know that really for some of these kids it's really very challenging. If you are in school and you are studying, and at the same time after school you have to go and help wash dishes in your father's hawker store and all that, there's just no way you can do well unless you are super brilliant. Some people are like that. So some of our ministers, for example, right, they grew up really poor, dirt poor, and yet they emerged top scholar and all that. Now those are very exceptional people, but most people will not be able to do that. So they're concerned that that may not be the reality at the end. But I think that anybody who do that, go through the program, will certainly appreciate. So I think that's important. And when you appreciate the fact that the other person may not be as privileged as you are, then empathy grows.
Yes,
then
absolutely.
Prayerfully, you would then be more caring or more tolerant or more kind to the other person. Then that certainly is one way to build a better society. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Teck Meng. This was really a delight and really a privilege for me, and I'm sure for our audience as well. I think at this juncture, I would like for us to open up the floor and the program to questions from our viewers. Yes, so please feel free to continue to send your questions to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel and drop them under comments. Oh, and here we have a question, and I think either of us could roll the dice and answer the questions and pick who wants to answer the question. The first question, I'll read it out. It's how sustainable our charity works, like building houses and amenities in foreign countries. Won't the communities become reliant on these aid? Oh, I think, Teck Meng, why don't I arrow you for that one?
No, it's an excellent question.
Yes, very good question.
Yeah, it's precisely because of this that Habitat's philosophy comes in, right? So Habitat is, we call it not a gift, not a hand out, but a hand up. So the idea is to be catalytic. That's why when we build a house, normally we want the house partner to build alongside with the volunteers, so that the house partner know that this is my house. It's not just a gift. So one of the signs of the success of this is that after a house is built, if you see that the house partner start to plant plants around the house, you know that you have succeeded because they are treasuring their house. So we should try our best not to give away houses for free, because if you do that, they will trash it because it's free. So then we also try to work in a system where the person will pay back the cost of the house in a not-for-profit manner. So some countries, they pay back full. I know in China, in some provinces, they pay back full. Some places, they pay back maybe only 10-20%. Vietnam, for example, the income very low. And at the same time, we are very strategic in helping people. Habitat for Humanity largely help what we call the working poor. So we are not about the poorest of the poor, we are about the working poor. The idea is that if we can get this laborer guy a proper roof over his house, he get his dignity back, he make money with his life, he will then serve his community, and the community will be strengthened because this guy who is working is able to then provide better for his family. So in that way, it's about sustainability long run. So there are many different strategies in charity. Some people just go for the poorest of the poor. For example, Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa's life was devoted to serving the poorest of the poor so that they can die a dignified death. So everybody's calling is different. For us, we are very aware of sustainability issue, and we deliberately want to make sure that the community is thriving. I will tell you that we are so careful that gender equality is very important to us. We found out that in developing countries, many times if you build a house, you have a title deed, right? We will make sure the title deed is in a woman's name rather than in a man's name. Because in some of these places, the man will sell the house and buy a motorcycle immediately. Whereas the woman would think about their children and the future, and so she'll hold on. Yeah. So we want to make sure that everything that we build will not end up being a slum later. So we're very careful with it. So I would say that you should, there's many charities out there, Habitat is really very focused on sustainability and long-term well-being. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I think one of the things that we are also very thankful for, you know, in your sharing is that in terms of distribution of responsibilities, people need to also feel not just like they're helped, but they also need to know how to help themselves and value and learn how to become self-sufficient as well.
Yeah, we are very careful with this. For example, you notice that I use the word house partner. I did not use the word the poor, the desperate, so they are partners with us, you know, and when we bring the volunteer to the place, we always brief the volunteer first, that you are not to go and laugh at them and say, hey, how come your house is like that? Especially Singaporeans, they like to say, in Singapore, we all something. Then we always tell them, please don't do that.
All right, we had another question, sorry. So, yes. Okay. So how can we make volunteering a way of life in Singapore if CIP or VIA hours are no longer compulsory? I guess I would like to have a go on this, but why don't you start first? Yeah.
I think it all depends on what's the value system we transmit to our young people, right? So what do you measure them with? So at this point of time, we are measuring them with what is called mathematical, logical thing. We just measure them with their exam scores. Yeah, we don't highlight so much. So let's say that your little Johnny or little Elizabeth is a very kind-hearted child and help the neighbor and all that, but really suck in school, basically, then don't do well in school. So as a parent, what would you say to him or her? I think as a whole society, we have to answer the question. Would you be happy that your child is a caring and wonderful, kind kid, but just don't do well academically? Or would you go after the child and praise the child only because that fella is doing well in school? If you do the latter, then you will never get out of this trap.
I personally think that in Singapore, like what you mentioned just now, a lot of things are already very convenient, and convenience is like the modus operandi in Singapore, right? If you're convenient to MRT station, your house or your property has more value, and whatnot. And even things like, recycling. When I lived in Canada, I think one of the things that parents took a lot of pride in teaching their children is actually sorting recycling and making sure that the garbage is also sorted out so that it's more sustainable, and so that it's the work for the garbage collector is also easier. I think what we mentioned just now about not having that one day where there's no cleaners around, where we have to go out and really do the community work itself, those kinds of activities are very important. And parents are the exemplars for children at home. So I think one of the things parents or older people in the family could do is really get involved and show the way, get involved in community, right? Get involved in volunteer work. Like what you said, it doesn't take much actually just to spend 1 hour or half an hour just doing some volunteer work a week. Yeah, and that would make a whole world of difference already.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I guess we have a lot of big questions today. All right, apart from donations, charity, encouraging volunteerism and empathy, what are some other ways we can influence policy change and laws to alleviate inequality? I will once again take Meng for this question because it deals with policy change and laws.
Yeah, this is a very tough question to answer because in the entire world you do have clashes of value system right now. Which system is coming on strong? One versus the other. The Americans just had a summit of democracy or something like that. Because this has to do with very fundamental philosophical understanding of what a society should be like. and who is doing what. Are you going to tax the rich and give it to the poor by force? In the Singaporean philosophy, my understanding is that the government would not want to impede any economic development. That means the government will not stop you from being rich, because the idea is that if we do that, then everybody becomes poor. So the philosophy of the government is that we will allow you to be as rich as you can, and at the same time encourage you to give as much as you can. We talk about faith, right? The Methodist Church founder is called John Wesley. John Wesley say you should make as much money as you can, save as much money as you can, and give as much money as you can. So that's a capitalist kind of idea. I think given the present situation, advocating that stance is probably the correct way to do it. So that if you have, you should give, and you have more, you should give more. But of course, in actual application, it may be a very uphill task. But I think after thinking about this issue for a long time, that seems to be the most doable approach. That means you, like programs like this, is wonderful. Continue to encourage people to do more. And sometimes you just chipping at the problem one at a time. And prayerfully, you will make a good difference in due time. So like you said earlier, it was sometimes a baby step thing. Yeah.
And I'll just chime in here very quickly as well. I think one of the things we do at the Best of You since 2019 was that we, over the past 2 years, we have performed a drama performance for half an hour in schools about urban poverty. And what happens after that drama performance is we get students and also teachers to write down their thoughts in postcards. And what's so great about that is when you see young children who write down, that this is the first time they've seen a one-room flat. Because what happened in the performance is that we brought a one-room flat into the middle of the assembly hall, and we performed around that one-room flat. And for many of them, it's their first time seeing it. So we essentially brought that experience into the hall itself. And when you see students write postcards to say that in the future they want to take care they want to be mindful of people living in one-room flats or people who have less than them, something has changed. And like you said, empathy needs to be built when they're young, right? So I think these are very essential small steps. It may always look like, like what you also mentioned earlier, like, oh yeah, it's just a drop in a bucket, why do I do it, right? If you only adopt that mentality, right, then things will never change, right? But like you said, if you're chipping at it, sometimes a big chip falls off and it makes a wonderful impact. So when you're talking about policies and laws, I feel that it really comes down to people and the narrative. One of the reasons why we run this program as well, it's because we were very inspired by a book called This Is What Inequality Looks Like, written by a sociology professor here called Teo Yo Yen. And in one of her chapters, she said that the myth of poverty in Singapore is that Singapore is middle class, right? We're widely middle class, and poverty is an exception. So it's part of normality because they're just at the very ends of normality. If they are at the very ends of normality, then it should be accepted, right? It's just exceptional, so it can be tolerated. But then she poses the question to us, are these people exceptional? Are they not part of our community, right? And is it okay that we tolerate their existence in such poor conditions? The answer is no. So a lot of it is also mindset change. So when we do such programs for the younger audiences, I know it kind of trickles up to their parents and educators as well. Yeah. So, wow. All right, I think this is one of the last few questions, right? If I see a friend who seems to be in a rough place, how might I reach out and help? Oh, this is actually not that easy. Shall we both take a turn at this? Yeah.
Well, you said that after you see the bronze timetable, that there will be places that people can go to.
Yes, a resource hub.
Help. Yeah. So one thing that's very true in Singapore is that there are many places, and you can go to the website of the Ministry of community youth and sports or MCCY as well, or even call your MP, you know. So one of the things that I do know is that our system is in place, and there are many places you can seek help. So thankfully that's the case in Singapore. But of course we are here to encourage people to proactively seek out people who need help. So the questionnaire is a good one because you are spotting somebody who need help. So that's exactly what we try to achieve.
Yeah, and as Teck Meng said, the resources are out there. I think it's just good to ask questions. It's good to acknowledge the people around you who need help. And then the more questions you ask, maybe you don't know where to find resources, but just with that caring question itself, the more you ask other people, you would lend yourself with, you know, other resources as well. And then people would give you options as to, you know, where they could go to seek help. And sometimes, you know, for many people, it's also just knowing other people, just acknowledging your neighbor, acknowledging someone who needs help, right? That makes a big difference already.
Yeah, so for the questionnaire, right, you can contact us and we will see what the case is. If it is very close to what we do, we will do it. If not, we will refer you to the right place where you can, the friend can get the help he or she needs. Yeah.
All right, so I guess we're drawing to the close today. So I think at this juncture, we are at the very end of our wonderful discussion today. Thank you for those questions, right? For those of you who did not manage to have your questions answered, we hope to continue our discussion on Facebook event page under discussion, the discussion tab. And as we draw to a close to today's program, we also want you to take 15 minutes of your time to experience the impossible timetable of Ron. Now, this is an interactive experience. It's an interactive storybook, right? Take a walk in his shoes and think about the difficult decisions he has to make at such a young age. Ask yourself this: what are some of the small steps I can take to make things better? What would I tell my child if he or she were to encounter a child like Ron? How can I teach my child to be kinder and to be more aware of his or her surroundings? You may be also asking, as some of you already asked, right? How can I get more involved? Well, the resource hub that culminates in Ron's story, right, has many of community organizations where you can get involved. Engineering Good, Free Food for All, Kampong Kakis, and of course Habitat for Humanity Singapore are just a few of such wonderful organizations doing good in the community. And to learn more about the Best of You movement and also about the resource hub as well, right, please visit our website at www.thebestofyou.sg. And social media platforms, Julie's The Best of You. And we've come to the very close of our program today. Once again, thank you so much for being here today on this wonderful afternoon.
Sure, you're most welcome.
Thank you. And stay safe, everyone. And we'll see you in a couple of months for our next iteration. Thank you. you.